All right, welcome everybody. Excited to have you all here with us today. We're going to have a great chat with Matt Lafrance of Grade A. But before we get into that, I just want to share a couple of Ottawa Board of Trade updates with you. In particular, I'd like to draw your attention to a brand new program that's being launched for all businesses nationwide. It's called the Post Promise. POST stands for People Outside Safely Together. And this is going to be a program where businesses have pledged to adhere to 5 basic steps in making sure that their businesses are ready for reopening in a safer manner. And we're very excited about this, especially since we are recommending staycations. And it would be great to know that if you're in Ottawa and you want to go to Kingston for the day and someone has a Post Promise decal in their store window, that you know that this business is safe and you can shop there with great confidence. So next week, a week from today on June 30th, we're going to have a great conversation with Goldie Hyder, the President and CEO of the Business Council of Canada, and he's going to talk more about the Post Promise, so I encourage you all to join us for that. Just before we turn this over to Matt, I do want to sorry, just a moment, I can only do so many things at one time, apparently. Yeah, this isn't going to happen. I want to thank our sponsors today. We have the Ottawa Citizen, who's our community partner, and I also want to thank Enbridge Gas, who is one of our presentation partners, and of course Grade A, our friends at Grade A, who not only have given me the technology to sit at home and do this with you all today, but they are our presentation partner. And Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you whenever you are ready.
Sure, I'll just share my screen here, and hopefully everything works from a technical standpoint. Everybody can see that, hopefully?
Yep, perfect.
Well, thanks for the intro, Lynn. I've been fortunate to work with you in the past, and the Ottawa Board of Trade is very lucky to have you. So thank you very much, and thanks for organizing this today. I am fortunate to be able to talk about something I'm very passionate about, and for me, it's really corporate culture. I've always been a big fan about trying to breed as much happiness in the workplace as we can. So today I was hoping to share a few things. We're not experts. We're just heavily experienced in this. A lot of what we learned is by, failing miserably many times and learning from others. And I think the Ottawa Board of Trade, more than anything, like any peer group that's local, is a phenomenal resource for anything like culture and engagement. So we've got questions throughout, really from a meeting flow perspective. The agenda is pretty straightforward. We're just going to talk about what is corporate culture. Sometimes it's a bit of a mystery for people. We'll talk about those building blocks of corporate culture. What are the current employee impacts? So what are your staff feeling? And what are staff across Canada feeling with COVID and working remotely? It's a major challenge right now. I think a lot of the adrenaline is wearing off. There's some tactics we can use from a technology standpoint that we'll share. Very simple things we can implement to help different elements of your corporate culture. And a few future thoughts. Technology is coming that we're going to see in the workplace, things that maybe become a little bit big brother-ish, and just how do you start, right? How do you start implementing some of the things we're talking about? From a communication standpoint during this meeting, if you could, keep your mic muted. Sometimes dogs bark and, my kids might run in the room, but ask questions throughout. Just ask questions through the chat. I love being interrupted. I prefer that it's a communication than just, me presenting. We'll have a few polls and questions throughout too. So hopefully that makes sense. I wanted to just start just to get a sense from everyone with an initial poll. So when you think of your staff today, how are they doing, right? How has your employee engagement changed after working remotely? Has it been negatively impacted? Is it about the same? Is it positively impacted? We're about 2.5, 3 months into it. And I'm kind of curious just to see what the results are. So if you're able to share with us, that information would be great. I know for us, people were excited. We almost saw utilization spike. Everybody was, engaged, especially because we were helping others set up remotely. But now that time's gone, like about 2 months into it, we really saw, isolation being an issue. We saw people really having trouble with it. So I'll be curious to see what the results are. for everyone else, and if we're in the same boat with you. Anybody else posting anything that you've got, Lynn?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. So we have 18 of 23 people responding so far. Do you want me to go ahead and show the poll results?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. Oh, we just got another one. Perfect.
Yeah, I think working remotely, I think a lot of people can echo this. It's difficult when your kids aren't home, but it's even more of a struggle when you've got your family at home. All right, so it's actually pretty even across the board. So 30% were positively impacted, 30% about the same, about 15% negatively impacted, and 25% were unsure. Well, for the ones that are unsure, at the end of this, we have a very simple survey you can pass to your staff just to get that feedback. But really getting in sort of that mindset is critical. Very briefly about us, we provide IT services across Canada. We started in 2002 as a co-op project. So my business partner was at Ottawa U, I was at Carleton. We started in the recession, and we just sort of grew with a simple idea, which was if we can create an environment that's fun and entertaining, our staff will be happy and they'll make our clients happy. And that sort of helped us. When we started seeing those results, we sort of built a playbook around corporate culture. And that's what we've been known for in our industry. We've been best in class performers, and we've shared those practices across North America with a lot of people. So I'm hoping to share a few ideas with you today. But from a chat perspective, if you can maybe put in there, what would you define corporate culture? How is it defined for you? You know, we've got our definition of it that I'll share, but maybe in the chat, what do you think, you know, when you think of those cultures that are really strong, what are they portraying? What are they showcasing? How do you define it? Just put it right in the chat. We'll share some of the ideas. Maybe Lynn, if you've seen anything pop up. There we go. We got a few people answering.
So we have workplace values and code of conduct. And then Carol Rings mentioned it's how employees experience their workplace.
It's a great way to look at it. You know, for us, we sort of look at it and define it as sort of common behaviors and values to create a unique social environment. If you think about some of the strongest cultures that, you know, if I mention, you know, as weird as it sounds, but the military, different type of religious groups, different type of organizations in sports, sororities, fraternities, colleges, they have very, very strong values. You know exactly what you're expecting when you sort of join that group. And it's a very unique environment. And I think the more unique and more polarizing almost, the more whoever's in that environment can understand it. But the best quote I've sort of seen from Ben Horowitz, there's a book out there that I highly recommend you read. It's called What You Do Is Who You Are. But the way he worded it was, it's what your team does when no one is watching and there's no playbook to follow. And that's really what your corporate culture is. As leaders, you provide that example. You set rules. You've got guidelines in your employee handbooks, your processes. But when there's no playbook and there's nobody there watching, what does your staff member do? And that at its core really is your corporate culture. There's building blocks to it. So, you know, we've got a kind of guide on how to build corporate culture, and I can always share that with you, and you can reach out to me afterwards. We're not really going to touch on it too much, but there's 4 real pillars, and these pillars come from positive psychology. Positive psychology is the study of happiness. And when you look at a happy individual, and this was sort of done through the late 90s, but it's really gotten popular in the late or 2010-ish. There's 4 building blocks of happy people. They have a sense of community. They're part of a group, right? There's a social setting. They have a sense of control over what they do. They have progress. They can, you know, gain expertise. They can get better at something. And there's a sense of purpose. And when it comes to corporate culture, you know, those 4 elements really answer the who. So who are we as a group? How do I grow in this company? What is my progress? When do I actually achieve that progress? And why am I doing this? And in all of these elements, there's pieces, and there's pieces to corporate culture. So under the who, your core values, you know, you mentioned how we behave at work, the traditions, the language and legend. So having a timeline, a rich history for your company, your organization, even just how you speak. What are the terms that you use? And from a traditions perspective, just to give you an example, at grade A, when you hit your 6-month probation, you recite an oath. And that oath is our belief structure in front of the whole company. It's one of the traditions we have. But the richer and the stronger those traditions, the more sense of community you start to build. From a control perspective, you know, your policies, your process, your training programs, those are all critical in helping individuals understand how they can progress. And how they progress, you know, and the path that they have is all around those career paths, those goals, and the incentive systems in place. The purpose, though, for me is always one of the most critical ones. So that is really your mission statement, the why. Why am I doing what I do every day? And how do I get feedback, right? So if I do my job properly, how does it impact the staff? How does it impact other clients? You know, and that feedback loop is critical. So as a whole, you know, your infrastructure, both from a leadership perspective and your technology perspective, can help support these things. And we'll talk about that briefly. So why do we focus on it? Well, you know, I think it's pretty straightforward. The happier your staff, the more engaged they are. The more engaged they are, the better they serve, you know, the customer community that you service. If you have a strong corporate culture, you'll see significantly less turnover, right? People stay. Not only are you hiring the right people at the beginning because you've defined that culture, you're getting the right people in the door, so you're less likely to let them go or have them leave over time. Absenteeism drops dramatically. So again, people aren't, they feel comfortable at work. And overall, it's a very profitable thing from a financial perspective. The higher you can increase your employee engagement, so every 10% increase will generally increase financial performance by about 4%. So if you start to benchmark, and there's a group called Gallup, but they have a survey of 12 questions. We've been using them for years, and I'll share it with you later. But if you start to survey your staff with Gallup's poll, you can really get that information about their employee engagement. And you can start to benchmark it year over year and see if what you're doing is working. And I guarantee you will start to see your financial performance increase as your employee engagement increases. Any questions so far? Comments? So we're in the world of COVID. Everybody's remote. And we mentioned briefly that corporate culture is what your staff do and there's nobody watching and there's no playbook. So I think it's even increasingly important right now just to get a sense for how to establish it. Because there's a lot of times, I'm sure right now, where your staff are at home, they don't have somebody to reach out to very easily, and they're making decisions on behalf of your organization. Right now, when we polled and we looked at Canada's top employee concerns, because again, I want to get into the psychology of our staff right now, there were really 4 concerns that were at top of mind. The first was job security, which makes sense. Everyone's financially impacted. The other was the overall company impact. So how is your company and organization doing through this? Staying positive, obviously, is a struggle for a lot of people right now. And just general safety. Now, if we could maybe send that poll out, Lynn, I'd like to get a sense for where do you see, if these are the 4 highest concerns for Canadian companies right now, and we'll tell you which one is number 1, what do you think for your staff or for staff across Canada is the most impactful? Does anybody else feel that? I guess and I'm wondering if there's any other major concerns that your staff are having, just add them to the chat. I'd be curious to see. You know, I think for all of us right now, it's a very difficult time, and trying to predict the future is next to impossible. Everybody talks about a U recovery, a W recovery. It could be a zigzag forever, who knows? But I find right now, at least for myself, what we saw with our staff, staying positive has been a very critical one. All right, what do we got here? Job security at 32%, company impact at 14%, staying positive at 23%, and safety at 32%. Well, strangely enough, across Canada, the number 1 concern about from your staff and from most staff is actually the impact that your business is having. They actually care about what's going on because it's such a effect across all the other pillars. And work being, you know, again, a source of income, a source of community, a source of growth, if that gets impacted, it's obviously top of mind. So it's interesting to see that really is the number one. I thought staying positive and safety would be more so. So we know people are having trouble. They're feeling isolated. Is there anything anybody wants to share as far as their staff and how they're dealing with this currently? Any thoughts? Anything in the chat that? Yeah, I thought staying positive would be number one. Lynn mentioned that. Yeah, it's an incredible time, and I don't think it's an unprecedented time. Well, if we jump into remote work, now I guess everyone's getting used to seeing these video chats. I don't know if you're getting sick of them like myself. I sort of enjoy having just a phone call and not being in front of a screen all the time. But we're seeing that there really there's a duality to it. So working remotely, just in general, reduces stress. It gives people a lot more time to focus. They're not getting interrupted as much. There's a huge amount of time savings from a commute perspective, and their schedules are much more flexible. But on the really strange side, the challenges are connected. So although your stress is reduced, you're not as connected socially. You've got more time to focus, but there's a lot of distractions at home. You've saved time on your commute, but you're working too much. You're always connected. You're always on your phone. You're working at night now. Your home and work, the work-life balance has sort of disappeared a little bit. And although your schedule is very flexible, time management is becoming increasingly difficult. And being able to schedule your time appropriately isn't the same as it is when you're in the office. Lynn mentioned here working too much is a challenge. Absolutely. I mean, I know right now I'm trying to leave my phone in a different room when I want to stop working. I'm actually presenting from my bedroom. So my TV or my computer is right here in my bedroom. So it's hard to escape. And especially for some of your staff who probably have a one-bedroom apartment, it's a very difficult challenge to disconnect. But these are the key benefits and challenges that we see. And I like to sort of mention that I know right now in the tech business community that we're talking to in our industry, everyone's talking about getting rid of their office. They want to drop their office space. They want to work remotely forever. You hear Shopify talking about it. And I sort of think of it as remote work being the keto diet of business strategies. The keto diet was super popular with Atkins. No carbs, no sugar. Let's just eat meat and cheese and we'll lose weight. But the reality is, the results are fast. So you can reduce your costs pretty quickly. You can gain on some time. It's very easy to do, but the long-term results are uncertain. And I think from an overall perspective, the question is it sustainable for us to think that we're going to be able to work remotely forever? When we started our business, the giants in our tech industry did a remote work study that I kind of like to highlight. So from 2008 to 2017, they had about 40% of or more of their staff working remotely. And they thought that was the way to go. Nothing would change. And over almost 10 years, what they discovered was, body language and touch can't be replicated, right? So, they mentioned that when you walk into an interview, you've already said 95% of what you said, you need to say with your body and the way you carry yourself. But that, in turn, that interaction, being in the same physical space, Lynn and I were talking about being around mountains earlier, and how it makes you feel. Being in a group setting makes you feel different. It helps you build trust faster. And trust is critical in your corporate culture. It's critical in innovation and collaboration. So I do believe, and I think the reality for all of us is we're going to take the benefits of working remotely, but the future is a hybrid model. I don't think we're going to be able to just focus on being remote forever. So with that being said, just out of curiosity from a poll perspective, are you looking to reduce your office space in the future? What are the overall plans? Are you going to stay the same? I know for us, we're probably going to drop down to about 60% of the space. But I'm curious to see if everyone else has the same mentality. I think it'll be a challenge for commercial landlords, and there'll be probably more flexible options in the future. I'd be shocked to see somebody sign off on a 10-year lease without a pandemic clause in it. But I'll be curious to see what are your thoughts? Are you thinking about changing the way you have your office space?
I'm just going to give a moment for one or two more poll results, but there's been some very interesting comments being put into the chat.
Yeah, no, I'm taking a look right now. App fatigue as companies introduce more and more ways to collaborate. Absolutely. I mean, am I using Zoom? Am I jumping on Teams? Am I on Skype? Like, I think that is definitely dragging people down. And there really isn't a standard. So it's you know, you jump onto one collaboration platform, you have trouble hearing somebody. Okay, remote only 5%. So a large percentage are thinking about either reducing their space or staying the same. And I think that's echoed across Canada. Interoffice connections and face-to-face can't really be replicated from Craig. I totally agree with you. I think even right now, if we were in a room in front of a whiteboard being able to collaborate, it would be more interactive. It's very, very hard to be interactive. I like to say that leadership is sort of built in the cracks in your calendar. So I don't know if a lot of you did the same, but I used to walk the halls. I used to talk to people, and it's hard to mentor somebody right now remotely. You have to do it intentionally. You have to set up a meeting or a Skype call or a phone call to really start helping somebody out. And it's not as natural or doesn't flow in the same way. Barbara, you mentioned keeping the office space, but using it differently. I think a lot of people are going to have to do that. We have very tight desks, people working in close proximity. That's going to have to change and spreading out. Craig, you mentioned that as well. I think we're going to all have to, we might need a little bit more space for the same amount of staff. I'm just looking at some of the other questions here. Yeah, so Kim, you mentioned looking at a booking space to go into to the office. Yeah, so a lot of people are trying to come back in waves. So you might have one group of staff members coming in, and then the next week it's another group. So that's really going to be a struggle as we start to sort of open up our workspaces. So if we go back to what we're here to talk about, so technology. Being in the tech business for years, we're sometimes used as a, call it a crutch for HR. In the past, we've been asked to lock people's accounts out before they've been terminated. It's really awkward. There's things that, sometimes owners want to spy on their staff to get a sense for what they're doing rather than have a conversation. And all I would say is technology is really just part of the overall solution. Leadership is a catalyst. Leadership, the way you lead, the way you treat your staff, the trust you provide is the most critical part in this piece. And it can't be replaced with a piece of technology, a report, a sensor. So what we're going to share are just really ways to improve the way you already lead. And the big part right now with leadership is about it being intentional. You've got to consider building a playbook, allocating time, because the mentorship that you used to provide when you were face-to-face with your staff is no longer there. So we went back to our sort of culture building blocks: the community, the progress, the purpose, and control. From a leadership perspective, what we use internally as our sort of core pillars, is our disciplined operations, our strategy and vision, nurturing relationships, and innovation and change. And leadership really provides trust, but also the example. Your corporate culture is really an echo or a mirror of how you perform at work. Staff take their example from you. If you leave early, well, they'll think leaving early is okay. If you're focused on being a workaholic, they're going to think that has to be done. So really how you're acting right now, how you're collaborating with your staff, how you're communicating, they're going to echo. And I think it's important to think about intentionally being present in a virtual world. From a technology standpoint, there's 4 pillars we look at. So we're trying to provide that technological platform so your leadership can shine. Business intelligence is really around, the data you have and how do you use it. A collaboration platform. So a lot of you are probably using Office 365 or Google or potentially Slack. Those are sort of the key collaboration platforms where your staff communicate and talk. The application ecosystem. So what are all the apps you use that are critical to your business? And then the governance and support. These are the policies you have in place, not only protect your staff, but the data and just how your technology, again, supports leadership. Your technology should make you more agile as an organization. If it's not, then there's definitely something that's not gelling, especially in this day and age. Being able to work anywhere should be a possibility. getting data on anything should really be a possibility. And the fact that you're using a platform right now will allow you to do that. Now, when we talk about collaboration platform, if you haven't picked something right now, and when I say collaboration platform, it's really something that encompasses all your communication, your chats, your meetings, your calls, all of your files should be stored up there. They generally have ways to integrate additional apps and automate some of those workflows. We're big fans of Microsoft Office 365. So a lot of what we're going to talk about in this next step, really we're just naming products that are part of Office 365, but there's a reciprocal or a similar product in Google and Slack as well. And those are the three top platforms to allow people to communicate. But I think making sure you're on the right one is critical before starting anything. Any questions with regards to collaboration platform? What are people using right now? I'm kind of curious just to get a sense from everybody. Is anybody on Office 365? Does the word team sound familiar to you? Because that seems to be very popular. Are people using Google? Are people using Slack right now? All right, we're getting some feedback here. Office 365. And you know, the best part about being on this Slack and Google, okay, yeah, we see Slack and Google, you know, and one of the sort of biggest critical pieces when you're picking a product like this, a lot of it comes down to what are your staff already familiar with? If they're already familiar with, you know, in the development world, Google, Slack are very, very popular. But if you've been sort of familiar with the Microsoft Office suite of apps, staying on that platform makes it easy to transition people to their cloud version. Too many, yeah, I agree with you. I agree. There's probably too many apps right now, and it's just driving people crazy. So if we've got our platform, you know, we're thinking about how do we improve our culture. These are some ideas. So we look at our community, the 4 pillars of culture, right? Community, control, progress, and purpose. These are things that we're doing internally, things that we've either stolen as ideas from other peers or even groups, other business groups that we're part of. And I hope that some of these can, you know, they're just so simple that you can potentially take and help improve your culture. And I'll stop after each one, and maybe we can just have a quick, if there's any comments or questions, we can talk about it. So from a community perspective, in your collaboration, let's say you're using Office 365 and you're using Teams. Most of these platforms have what they call a chat. But right now, your staff probably interacted socially in the office somewhere. We've got a great kitchen. You know, Lynn's been there. We've got a pool table. People can just sit. They can congregate. But that doesn't exist anymore. So ensuring that you've got a virtual water cooler. So we have a section for the food network here at Grade A. So we have a lot of people who like to cook. They can share their pictures. We've got I think it's called the Grade A Zoo. But basically, you know, animal pictures, anything along those lines where people can have a discussion, a social discussion that doesn't necessarily involve work. And I'm sure a lot of you are already doing that, but I feel like that right now has been a big impact, a positive impact for our staff to just be able to communicate and again, create their mini groups within our corporate culture. One of our partners was mentioning social distance dollars. So we're not traveling. You know, we used to pay out a lot for people to go to client sites, their gas, their mileage, all of this has been recouped, which is great. But being able to attribute that and provide it as a budget for groups to get together in a socially distant way. So that maybe you can meet in a specific area. Maybe you can get together after hours and have an activity. But providing some funding for that, you know, just seeing some of your colleagues, I know even myself going into the office and seeing somebody face to face, it's just weird now. And it feels good. And it feels great, and it feels a little more normal. Another one that I highly recommend, and there's a group in our tech peer group that's done this, but they call it a buddy system. So a lot of people have one-to-ones with their managers, but consider on a weekly basis or even a monthly basis, setting up a buddy system between team members. And their job is just on whether they want to establish it daily or whether they want to establish on a weekly basis, having a one-to-one and just connecting with somebody else in the organization who isn't necessarily part of their team. They can do that through their collaboration platform pretty easily. And it just allows people to have a conversation with somebody else in the firm. Maybe that's not necessarily about business. Engagement surveys are probably something that everyone's using. So on the Office platform, there's Microsoft Forms, very easy way to create. I mean, it's never been easier to make surveys, quizzes, and polls, but getting feedback from your staff is critical. Allowing them to give anonymous feedback. So in a community, sometimes that's difficult. If you're a very tight-knit community, you don't want to be somebody who's causing an issue. But providing anonymous feedback and having a spot in your collaboration platform for anonymous feedback is a very, very important thing. And it'll probably get you more, might give you more insight as a leader. Another thing you can do that's very straightforward, whether you're using Apple or Microsoft, when you log in, and what I love about this is the firm that we work with that did it, they surveyed all of their staff to get information about them. Tell me, what are your dreams? What are the things you want to do? And when they got that information, when you log into your computer, and there are about 250 staff, basically that information pops up. So there's a picture of the individual, and there's their personal information. So every time you log in, you actually get that personal information, which just, again, connects you with that individual. Very, very easy to implement. It's something that can be set up within minutes. And again, it just builds that camaraderie in that community. Kahoot, if you've never used it, it's an online quiz platform, very fun for games, free to use. We can do it before team meetings. Sometimes we'll run a Kahoot, and maybe about our corporate culture, maybe questions about our corporate culture, maybe questions about Seinfeld because the team likes Seinfeld. But keeping it fun and entertaining is probably the most important thing right now and light. Lastly, drop-in calls. So one thing that's worked really well for us in our schedule is putting a calendar item. So we have a Friday, we call it a virtual beer and a chat. And if you want to join from 4 to 5, you're welcome to join. If you don't want to, you don't have to. But these drop-in calls in people's calendars allow people to sort of get together on a social basis without the rigidity of a meeting, without the need to talk about business. But scheduling those drop-in calls and having them present has been a big help for us and keeps people connected. We do also, we had MTV used to have a show called Cribs, where celebrities would take you through their office or their house. And we have our staff doing that now. So they'll take their camera, they'll bring us through their house. We get a sense of what they're doing. And again, it just builds that sense of community. So a show and tell, a lot of people are doing that. So there's items in their house, there's gardens they're working on right now. Most people's backyards are immaculate. Showing them off and showing off their kids, their animals. Again, it just builds that sense of community, and you've got the technology right at your fingertips. You can see my messy background, which is my bedroom here. My wife would be appalled. But being able to just show the real world and where you live makes you as a leader just normal. And I think that's really important. And virtual Q&As. So if you're doing town halls already, we used to do a quarterly town hall. We used to do a weekly all company huddle. But giving staff the ability to ask questions to the leadership team, probably even more frequently than you expect. I'd say monthly would probably be a good recommendation. But setting up those monthly virtual Q&As, being able to just get in front of the team virtually, answer those questions, have a discussion. I imagine most of you are already doing that, but it's a very big impact to the community you've built. Any questions as far as these items here that you want to add to the chat? I know they're all pretty straightforward, but sometimes the easy things to do are actually really hard to implement and keep going, but they are the most impactful.
Matt, there are a couple of interesting questions that have been posted in the chat. You might want to address them in a more appropriate time, but if you want to have a quick pause and look at those. One's from
Sure.
Carol.
Yeah, okay, I can see here. So if you put out a survey, you have to be prepared to deal with what it tells you. Yeah, I think facing the music sometimes as a leader, or facing, I think, Jim Collins used to say facing in the direction of danger is important. And I think right now, transparency is more important than, I guess, honesty in a way, like being very open with what you have rather than filtering out what to share is critical. Staff surveys have been helpful from Craig. Yeah, thank you for that. I totally understand. how do you test, control, train, and monitor anything new right now? So hard to do remotely. Oh, that is a tough one. You know, I think what we've done, because we've started some initiatives that are completely remote, and I can probably talk to you about that offline if you want, Kate. There's some things we've done really poorly. So I could probably teach you what not to do. But there are things you can do to manage any type of project rollout right now using some of the tools that are at your disposal. If you're on Office 365, Microsoft Planner is a fantastic way to do it, and very, very simple to use. But I can probably talk to you offline and give you some tips again on what not to do. And Asana is a great project management tool from Craig. Vicky's mentioning worried about moving staff from 2010 to Office 365 in a few months. Well, if it's any benefit to you, Vicky, one thing I would highly recommend if you're making a pretty big leap is just consider investing a few dollars in, there's learning management systems out there. Again, I can talk to you offline. That'll just get people trained. I mean, the information's there. They can just get trained, and it almost shows them where they used to click and where they have to click now when they upgrade their platforms.
Matt, we missed a question from a little bit earlier from Carol.
Yeah.
She's asking about the type of tool that you pick and whether or not it can help support the type of culture that you want to have.
So if you're thinking about your sort of collaboration platform, fortunately, they all kind of do the same thing. You know, I think there's some that have certain features. When it comes to culture, a lot of it's going to be driven by the way you structure your culture, and the tool is just going to support it. So feeling empowered, it'll come less from the technology because you can create those engagement surveys. You can be present as a leader. And I don't know, Carol, if you've ever gone through an exercise to create a culture playbook. I could probably talk about an hour on it, but we have a process on how to really define your culture in a playbook. And it's something you can share with your staff. And that's something maybe we can talk about offline, but I can share with you the process and showcase it. But the tool is not really going to make too much of a difference from promoting innovation. All of these platforms are updating daily. You've never seen so much work behind upgrading and implementing these platforms. So you're going to see changes happening on all three, whether it's Slack, Google, or Office 365. But I would just suggest whatever you pick, make sure you pay for it, because you'd probably rather pay a fee per employee than know that your data is potentially shared or your privacy is not protected. So I would just suggest picking one of the key platforms is important. All right, so hopefully some of those ideas can help you a bit. The one that I personally feel that is critical is the control component. And I feel like although we've been able to work remotely and sort of get control of our time, the routine we all had, so driving to work, I would drive to work, I would listen to a podcast. It was part of my learning process. I don't do that anymore. I get up later, I have breakfast, say hi to the kids, I jump in front of my computer. I skip that part of my process. And now you almost, I'm trying to come to terms with the fact that this is the new reality. So I have to build that new schedule that I used to have that was successful for me. So control has been difficult. You can also imagine that now that you've got a chat tool and your staff, there's some critical staff. So Lynn is a fantastic employee. I can chat with her every minute of every day. I can ask her questions nonstop. Setting the policy for that. What is acceptable? When am I okay to chat with you? When am I okay to send you an email? When should I give you a phone call? Is it okay for me to turn off my video when we're on a conference call? So if those things aren't defined, a lot of your staff may feel that lack of control. They don't know what the rules are, right? Is it okay for me to turn off all of my notifications on my chat and answer them at the end of the day? And I think as a team, and we've got a templated communication policy you can share with your team that I can share with you afterwards. But having that defined would shock you how empowering it is to your team. On all the platforms, but on Microsoft, there's a tool called Bookings. But essentially, it allows your staff to share their calendar in a bit of a different way, rather than just have people drop meetings in and book them up. And I'm sure you felt this when we all went remotely. I had a meeting at 9 o'clock. it went till 10. You had a meeting at 10 o'clock, it went till 11. All of a sudden you were working through lunch and you were exhausted by the end of the day. Blocking off time for you to just have some slack time right now is critical. So blocking off your breaks and lunches, but also doing that company-wide. Your IT team should be able to set up those policies so that everybody has this time blocked off. And giving your staff access to their own calendar controls, right? So maybe they don't want to necessarily have it wide open. We're working in it's not a continuous day anymore. It's not a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 4. People are working earlier. They're maybe going to the grocery store. If they're taking care of their kids, they're working a little bit later. So their calendars really need to be under their control. And Planner's a task management tool in Office 365. It's fantastic for lists. It's fantastic for sharing tasks across an organization. If you're not doing that right now and you're on the Office 365 platform, I highly recommend you take a look at it. So again, you had mentioned, how do we get something implemented while we're all remote? Planner is a really easy way to do it. Asana is a fantastic tool for it too. One thing to consider, when you are booking meetings, I always kind of joke that a meeting will always take as long as the time allocated. So again, if you're working virtually, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, there's a meeting. There's no break. Consider making your default time for meetings 45 minutes and starting 15 minutes into an hour and ending, 15 minutes before the hour is done, just to give people that time in between meetings, because there's meeting-itis happening right now, at least for our team, and we're seeing it across our customer base. So you can shrink the default time for a meeting very easily across your organization. You can determine when those meeting times should start, just to force breaks for people. There's a book we read that I've highlighted at the end of the presentation that talks about office hours. So again, I like Lynn. I'm asking her questions through chat. It's driving her crazy. The idea of office hours comes from universities and colleges, where a professor would say, hey, I'm available every Tuesday from 2 to 4. That's when you can come in and give me questions. I can help you out because I need to focus. I need to focus during the day. So consider giving your staff, or even yourselves, office hours where staff can connect with you and not feel like they're a burden, and you not feel like your time's being taken advantage of. We talked quickly about that communication guide. So how should your staff use the tools? Are they allowed to text you constantly? Are they allowed to call you constantly? What are the rules of engagement there? Consider, again, nights and weekends, you can actually get your email systems to stop sending emails. You can have people disconnected. Lynn and I were talking about how, anxiety is sometimes created when you're not living in the present, and technology has a knack of making you always think of the future, which creates that anxiety. So, consider having that wind down set up by your IT team to just say, after 5 o'clock, you're not going to see emails. We're not going to harass you. If it's an issue, we're going to call you. And consider controlling notifications company-wide. So we have a group, our sales team, they chat nonstop, drives everybody crazy if they're getting notifications popping up. So you can very easily, whether you're using Slack, Google, or Teams, control those notifications. Maybe we just decide to mute it all. Maybe we don't want a pop-up happening every second, near our clock in the corner of our screen. And we provide that control for the staff rather than have them do it. I'll just take a quick look. I noticed a few questions popped up, or comments. Let's see here. So yeah, Lynn, establishing guidelines for texting, emails, and calls, absolutely. And again, we have a policy that we can share with the group afterwards, just again to give that control. So yeah, Kim mentions that a lot of meetings run long. Leaving a half an hour between all meetings is important, and not booking over lunch. Yeah, it became this weird moment where I feel like when we were all remote, nobody respected breaks or lunches, and we just sort of worked nonstop. So it's great that you put that policy in place. And again, that leadership or that standard you're setting is going to be part of that culture you're building. Lynn, saving time between those video calls is critical. Totally agree.
Yep.
But I think the one thing that I find is there's always when I walk to my desk and I walk back to the boardroom, or there's a wind up and a wind down that happens. So it's hard. Lastly, on the control side, so having non-video calls, we're on a video screen. I'm not staring at you. I'm trying to stare at you. I see my face. I'm looking at the camera. It's an unnatural feeling. If you're introverted, it doesn't feel great. You feel a little awkward being on camera. So consider having non-video calls. People question it and they're like, well, we should all be on video. Well, if you trust your staff, you trust that they're listening, you trust that they're paying attention, you don't have to make sure you're looking at them to do that. So really consider that. Walk and talks. So we all have cell phones. All these apps work on your mobile device. Consider going for a walk. Have a conversation with somebody while you're actually doing an activity. You don't have to be sitting at your desk. It gets people outside. It's rejuvenating. And working remotely. So, I'm at my desk right now. I'm working, but I love to sit outside and work from my laptop. And encouraging people to be outdoors while they work is important. And adding that commute time. So we talked about that schedule being broken because we're remote. I'm not driving into work listening to Audible and learning, but building that time in your calendar is important. For the sake of time, I'm going to jump in a little bit. I didn't think I was going to talk so much. Sorry. From a progress perspective, if you're using an HR tool like Bamboo HR, good for you. It's a fantastic tool right now because people don't see their managers as much. They might not have as frequent one-to-ones, but a tool like Bamboo HR is really easy to set your career paths. What are the expectations per role? You can automate all your one-to-ones so that you make sure they're scheduled, they're tracked, and performance management can be done through there. Very simple, very intuitive, very cost-effective tool. I want to say it's between $5 and $7 a month per employee. On the flip side too, you can actually centralize all of the organization's approvals. It puts all of your staff's information in one spot. So I know when everyone went remote, all of a sudden people were wondering, well, where's the company list? What's so-and-so's phone number? What's their email address? How do I get in touch with everybody? That can all be centralized on your platform, but also on an HR platform as well. And that org chart as well. So I really recommend from a progress perspective, if you're doing it manually, it may be worth considering automating it with a tool like Bamboo HR. Right now, from a progress perspective, consider setting up a leadership program. We have what we call our Power Up Leadership Program we do with our staff. I'm very happy to share that with everybody afterwards. Book club has been fantastic. So you can set up an Audible account for the company. You can share it out with everybody. And I would suggest going back into that process of learning. We kind of came from a moment of chaos in March, sort of stabilizing right now. I think it's important to start thinking back to our strategic plans we created in January. Get back to that learning process. So Audible is a fantastic tool to share with your staff. And setting up times for virtual advice for leaders. So a lot of staff want to be able to ask questions about their career. They want to be able to ask questions to a leader. Making yourself accessible with office hours or giving people who have questions time to just sit down and talk about career progression is critical. Digitizing your timeline. So if you have a timeline, Grade A started in 2002, a bunch of stuff happened, we put it online. Having that rich history available to everybody is important. I'm sure a lot of you have goals for your company, for your departments, but really making them present. You can share winning reports. So if you're on Office 365, there's a platform or a tool called Power BI. It's kind of like Excel on steroids. If you know how to use Excel, you'll be able to use this very easily. But what you can do is pull from different data sources, whether it's QuickBooks, whether it's your CRM, your sales tools, and be able to provide those tools to staff, because staff right now want to know that your company is doing well. So what does winning look like? And let's share that information as frequently as we can. And now that everything's in one place, it's very easy to get that data. And lastly, the purpose piece, which for me is at the end of the day the most important, but generally the last one that you can tackle. A lot of these tools have what they call praise. So sending praise through your chats internally and externally, whether it's on LinkedIn externally or internally on Microsoft Teams, Google, it's so impactful. Somebody does something, and what I try and do, and I have it literally in my calendar, and my staff laugh about it, but every day I try and remember something that a staff member did that was above and beyond, and I share that with the team. You've got a phone in front of you. You can very easily record a weekly thank you, whether it's weekly, monthly, but sharing that on the platform too is important. Because people want to they want to see, they want to hear, they want to understand the impact of the work they're doing right now. And it may be something you were able to fulfill in person more easily. You've got to be more intentional in the current state. So we have our core values up here with our mission statement, but making sure that it's front and center. All of these tools are brandable, right? So when you log in, it should look like Grade A's homepage. When you walk through our office, we've got pictures everywhere. We've got everything branded in a specific way. These tools can be branded in the same way to provide that consistent feeling, because your staff are your first customers, and you want to make sure that they're engrossed in that culture, engrossed in that brand in the same way that you would your customers. And lastly, we've got staff that are all working remotely. We're going to start hiring people remotely. A tool like Bamboo HR actually is fantastic for building out a remote onboarding process, not only from the interview process, but the training component as well. And it's very important that we do this because not only can we, have our staff work remotely, they can work from anywhere. And I think with, focusing on your corporate culture is important because not only can they work from anywhere, but they can work for anyone. So there'll be an interesting challenge to keep staff working for us, especially since they can now work in the US even more easily. And it's just something to really just have top of mind. If you do client feedback surveys, I highly recommend that if you're not, to start with something like forms, but getting that and sharing that feedback across in a meeting. So we do a weekly huddle. We share all the positive comments that staff of the work staff have done. I think it's a critical piece right now because people feel isolated. They're not sure about the impact of the work they're doing. The more you can engage them and remind them that what they're doing is impacting people positively, both internally and externally, but it's also leading them towards, the overall goal of the organization. I hope, that gives you a few ideas, a few takeaways. I know I kind of skipped through it quickly, but, there's a lot to really think about. I just wanted to ask one last question, and really was, now that we're working remotely, what has been the most impactful change you've made for your team? I love to learn, so selfishly, I'd love to get some ideas too. But what are the things that they really like? What is something that really resonated with your team that you started doing while working remotely? I'd love to hear about it if you've got something up there that you can share.
While people are putting their comments into the chat, I just want to share something with our guests today. In a previous life, I was a retail manager, and I used to be able to walk into any store in a mall at any given time and immediately have a sense of the culture of that team. There's certain things that you can look at and observations, and if they're functioning well, if they're happy, if they're doing a great job. I'll tell you, when you walk into that Grade A office for the first time, you immediately know what the culture of this organization is like. It's welcoming and it's joyful and there's a great energy, and the pledge is right front and center as you come in. And I think Grade A does a marvelous job of not just talking about the importance of culture, but also living the importance of culture. And that was an unpaid plug for Grade A. It's something that I've noticed myself. When you walk in there, you can feel the positive energy, and it's just absolutely amazing. So when Matt said that he wanted to talk about IT and how it can help improve your company culture, I knew that he was the right person to be speaking with us today. So there you go, Matt. I'm done.
I appreciate it. But you know what? I think we all have that struggle now that we're remote, and we hired somebody remotely. So now they can't walk through that office. They can't feel that energy. You almost need to again, capture it as best you can and share it with them remotely, because it's a different game.
Oh, Heather just put an amazing suggestion or tip in the chat.
Setting a handwritten note card to each employee during mental, yes, absolutely. And anything you can do that is not automated. So like you say, a handwritten note. I know people that have driven over to people's homes and dropped off little gift baskets with a handwritten note. It goes so far. And it sounds too easy. It sounds like something that's not worth your time. It absolutely is. And it pays dividends. That's a fantastic idea. Saying hi, Kim, you mentioned saying hi on Teams and just randomly connecting. Yep, absolutely. I totally recommend that the more you can just connect with them, the better. C. Simpson, yeah, thanks for the presentation, but trust, absolutely, trust is really what is important and what is going to get eroded a little bit. Yeah, it's a challenge. Maybe just quickly to end, I don't want to be too negatively impacted, but something just to sort of echo the trust, you're going to see incredible improvements in many areas, right? So all these tools you're using, never have we had so much information online in one place. You're going to be able to, some people are talking about monitoring their staff to make sure they're socially distancing, which can lead to, a very dangerous path when it comes to privacy. There's cameras that are being installed that are checking people's temperatures. Some staff are waking up in the US right now. They've got a survey they fill out saying, how do they feel? Then they see their route coming to work. And if they've come into any contact with potentially anybody who has COVID, the system is actually preventing them from walking into the office, which again, it's easy to do. And when technology can do that, it feels like it's the right thing to do, but the reality is in many cases it's not. Office 365 has a tool called Delve, which, you probably never used it. You've just seen it there. But what it does is it tells you what all of your direct reports are doing on a minute by minute basis. Why did Lynn open that document for 4 hours and only make 1% of the document's changes? What was she doing, right? And the same with engagement. So right now we're having a video chat. I sat through a demo where I can tell on a video chat if somebody's engaged. Are they listening? Is there a connection? So AI is now trying to determine that. And imagine, after this conversation, my manager gets a report saying, yeah, Lynn didn't really like Matt. She wasn't engaged. She wasn't paying attention. She was on her keyboard. Maybe they shouldn't talk anymore. That's going to really cause some problems. So we as a society, tend to sort of amp up technology to replace leadership. And it's something very dangerous to do because it absolutely erodes trust. I call it managing by machine, but really be very, very careful here because we're going to see this technology ramp up very, very quickly. Just to end this quickly, I would recommend starting now with anything. If you're not sure where your staff are, if you're worried about the responses from an engagement survey, just do it. Send out an engagement survey. As I mentioned, Gallup has 12 questions. They also tell you how to interpret those questions very easily. They'll give you feedback right away that you can use as a benchmark. You can take some of the strategies we talked about here, and you can start to implement them very, very quickly on the platforms you're using with the IT teams that you have. And you just iterate, adjust and repeat, right? Because it's never perfect. Our culture has changed over the years. I like to say that it's like a shark. If it doesn't move, it dies. It's very important to make sure that you're always getting a pulse check. You're not scared to make changes. Some things may last forever in your culture, but it's very fine for things to change as your staff complement changes and your leadership changes. And lastly, I just want to say thank you to the Ottawa Board of Trade. I think the best thing you can do right now is be part of a group like this. Consider joining groups like Tech or any peer group that can really give you insight on experiences. Talking to an expert, it can provide some value, but really getting that hard-learned lesson from another entrepreneur goes so much further, I find. Everything we've talked about today, I'm very passionate about. So if you want help on helping define your culture, if you want help on implementing any of these things, my contact information is on that link. I'd love to help you out if I can, because I feel like helping build Ottawa's business community right now is a priority we should all have. Two other quick things. So GitLab is, you probably never heard of it, not a very popular company, but they are the largest remote work company. They're 100% remote. They've actually listed their manifesto, so how to do it effectively. highly recommend. There's even a section like, if you're only going to read something, read this little part. So people who are dealing with COVID, remote work issues, they've got a very quick, brief section to read. And then there's a company called Basecamp. They provide a project management tool, but their founders were very big on remote work. So there's a book called Remote. There's another one called It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work. I highly recommend it. Very entertaining, very easy reads, but they'll give you a ton of feedback, and I think they'll help you with some ideas that you can implement. So hopefully that was informative and you got a little bit out of it, and hopefully there's at least one takeaway for the time. But I really appreciate you joining, and again, thank you very much.
Matt, that was a great presentation. Thank you so much. Can we share your slide deck with the guests today?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's up on the website, and I'll send that link out. But anything, if there's a communication guide you need, if you want a playbook to put your culture together, these slides, anything, don't hesitate to reach out, because I feel like if I can help in any way and help that Ottawa business community, it'll make me feel great.
So I'll make sure that I get that link, and when we send out the notification that your webinar is live on our website, we'll include the link for everybody today. I think that they're really going to want to see the slides again, and they might want to share them with their coworkers. I would, if I was taking it back to the office, although most of my staff have joined this at one point or another today, so they've seen part of it. So amazing. So
awesome.
Thank you so much, Matt. I hope everybody on this call has gotten some value out of it today. And I wish you all a beautiful afternoon. Hopefully you can get outside before the next round of thunderstorms start, and have a wonderful day. See you all.
Thanks, everybody.